All right, so we are live here at 9:31 a.m. here in American Top Team. It is a huge honor for me. It actually is, though. I'm joined with Tommy G. Tommy, a black belt under Paul Rodriguez. And this is kind of cool for me because we've never really sat down and talked, even like when I've been training and stuff. So I'm looking forward to this.
How you doing? Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day. I mean, we used to hang out after class and go over technique and stuff, but we've never really talked.
Yeah, and I was probably a 1 or 2 stripe white belt at the time. It was actually really terrible because it was my first promotions that I attended is when you had a knee injury. So at that point, you had to deal with that. I never saw you, so I was a neophyte completely in my jiu-jitsu journey. So yeah, I was just asking you, like, what's a flower sweep? How's the flower sweep different from a pendulum sweep? That sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's been a year now, over a year. It was last August, so I've been out since last August. But yeah. Well,
we're glad to have you back, and that you're in good spirits with all that. So, I kind of want to just get to know you a little bit. So, my thing is, how did you first start jiu-jitsu? Like, how did you find out about it, and what got you into it?
Yeah, so I used to watch I think Tough just came out, so The Ultimate Fighter. The first season just came out. We used to watch the UFC back in high school and stuff and rent the tapes. And I was always interested in like the grappling aspects of it. But I didn't really know anything about it. It's kind of funny. The summer before I started, I think it might have been even a couple years before I started jiu-jitsu. I got on this pickup softball team. And Paul was on the team, actually. And I knew Paul from high school, kind of. We went to the same area and hung out with some of the same friends and stuff. But I knew of him. And I used to go to lunch right next to the old American Top Team, Knockout Fitness. And every day I just look in the window and see the people training and stuff. And I was always too afraid to go in. And then finally I went in and I saw Paul and decided just to start doing actual kick punch fitness classes. So it was just bad classes, like once or a couple times a week, and I just sit there and stare at the jiu-jitsu classes, and I was too afraid to do it. And then finally, after like a month of kick punch fitness, I just decided to start trying jiu-jitsu and never stopped.
So why do you think you were afraid? Like, have you like conceptualized that now looking back?
Yeah, I was always very shy, very unconfident in myself, and I just was just too nervous and too shy to take a class.
So how old are you when you stepped into the gym?
Was
this before or after college?
It was after college, so I was like 26 maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm 40 now, so it's been a while.
Yeah. So
this was like 2006.
Okay, and now were you one of those, the minute you did it, you got hooked, or did it take some time for you to get into it?
I was hooked immediately, yeah. I mean...
So do you know anybody that doesn't get viscerally addicted to jiu-jitsu within the first few weeks? Because I feel like that story is universal among practitioners.
So yeah, I mean, people that stay are definitely like that. Even the people that leave are usually like that, but there's something that causes them to not come back for whatever reason it is, but they're still hooked. Like even I have friends that have tried to come in and they did it for a month or so, and for whatever reasons they stopped, but they still talk to me about it, and that's all they want to talk about is jiu-jitsu. And it's pretty funny
because their significant others like, I don't want to talk about this. What is this? So when you got started into jiu-jitsu, like what? So first of all, because I was asking Jamie and Chris this, how many people were in your white belt class that have continued training that you know of? And I'm not trying to get names here. I'm curious about percentages. Like, how many people were in your white belt class and how many of them stuck around?
I mean, I think I'm kind of lucky where I have a few that I still like know and talk to and still come around, and some of them are still like gym owners here, and like Jim Andrews, we started almost the same exact time and stuff like that. Chris Vu, I started and he came over. I mean, he wasn't in my white belt class, but he was pretty close and stuff like that. But there's not many. I could probably 15 maybe that I know that still train over the last 15 years, you know.
And that's out of, can you like ballpark all the others that have like fallen on the wayside?
No.
Over under 100.
Oh, over 100.
Over 100, yeah. So do
I
you
mean, white
believe-
belts that have come in since I was a white belt, probably 100 white belts that came in while I was a white belt that probably don't train anymore.
Now, do you buy into the fact that the highest attrition rate is at blue belt, that people like stop after getting their blue?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Most people make it if they stick through white belt. They'll stick through, get their blue belt. They'll usually drop off a little bit, and then usually they don't make it to purple belt.
So what you would say is if you see someone get to purple, you're kind of like, okay, they're on their way at this point.
Yeah, I think so. For the most part, unless something in life kind of stops them, or yeah, I think at that point you already know what's going on. It's just kind of a matter of time at that point. You kind of just understand the phases of jiu-jitsu at that point. So they usually stick around, and they're usually in it for the long run.
The long run. So you're a white belt. You're training at Knockout Fitness, right?
Knockout Fitness.
Knockout Fitness, and that was the school, if I recall, that was near UCF. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
at the time it was right by the UC7 Plaza and UCF. It was there was a sub shop right next door and a Domino's right next door.
So good post training calories.
Yeah.
So what were classes like back then with Paul? Like, I'm kind of curious.
I don't know. I never took a class with Paul for a while.
Oh. Okay. So who taught classes? Was it Seth or was it?
So back then, Paul was a brown belt. Seth was around. He was, I don't know. He might have been a purple belt at the time. I don't even know. But the main teachers, my main instructors at the very beginning, were two brown belts. Actually, one of them might have been a purple belt at the time. But it was like 5 people in my first class. I got paired up with a brown belt that was kind of visiting, kind of helping teach. And the first thing we started doing were like sotogaris and stuff like that. And I didn't even know how to stand correctly. We just, a lot of guard work, but very similar to what we do now. I mean, the warm up, the kind of drilling, then going into the technique and stuff. It just wasn't quite as advanced and stuff like back then.
Okay. And
very basic.
And roughly, like, how long were you at the different belt ranks, if you think back?
So I got my blue belt pretty quick. I picked it up pretty quick. I think it was like 10 months. I think I got my blue belt, and then it's kind of hard because I all throughout there I got injured almost every belt. Like my first competition as a white belt, it was like probably 6 months in. I tore my ACL and tore my meniscus.
Fuck.
I trained for a year after, and I finally had to get it fixed. But yeah, so I had an ACL. I missed like periods of like 8 to 10 months, probably 4 times in my career so far, and then this has been the longest. So, but it was the standard pretty much. 2 years as a blue belt, probably 2 years as a purple belt, but I was coming when I got to purple belt and I came back to Orlando, I was coming 8 or 9 classes a week. I was coming in the mornings, coming in the afternoons. I was helping Paul teach and stuff like that. So it's a little different. Coming 2 to 3 times a week, it's usually about the standard. I was about the standard time.
Okay, and then how long were you at Brown?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I think it was about a year.
Okay.
Maybe a little longer. And at that time, I was, 10 times a week. 10 times a week, I was training or teaching, or
okay.
So that's a little bit.
So the intensity kept ramping up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I don't even remember how long it was. Yeah. It's crazy.
So, do you think belts matter?
I never put any emphasis on the belt. So for me, I didn't care. I never wanted to be promoted. I never thought I was ready to be promoted. So belts never mattered to me in one bit. I was going to train no matter what. Didn't matter what belt I was still going to come in and do the same training and still try to learn as much as I could. So no. For me, it doesn't matter.
You were there guys that you went with, training partners that you kind of used as measuring sticks for your development? We talk about Ryan Wilkerson a lot because he'll go hard. He's going to not really give much up to anybody, whether you're a white belt or a fellow brown belt. So he's kind of a good measuring stick, for progress.
Yeah, I used Ryan for me when I was a brown and black belt. So if I can not get smashed by Ryan, then I'm doing okay. If he's neon belting me for 3 minutes, then I know I need to step up my training and figure out what I'm doing wrong because I love Ryan. We always go hard, and I love training with him.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. So the thing about it's weird. Like I said, I was kind of looking forward to this conversation because like you said, most guys end up training here, and if you stick around, you're going to have conversations with people, and you're going to start to figure out where they're coming from. You actually commented on something that I felt like would have been a good conversation piece if we're just hanging around the gym, but you commented on one of the previous podcasts about how to roll etiquette when it comes to rolling, how to roll with. I don't think you were talking as much about how to roll with females as you were talking about how to roll with someone of lesser skill or someone that's smaller, and kind of what goes into that. And I was just kind of wondering, you've been, whether you like it or not, whether you're aware of it or not, you're kind of viewed when you're not around as, Paul's technical black belt. He's the guy that's very technical. He's the guy that is very knowledgeable. He's the guy that Paul will always praise when you're not around about, showing him stuff. You're the guy that's shown Paul stuff
yeah, he says that. I don't know how much. How true it is.
I mean, he says it though, and that from a guy like Paul, everyone's gonna listen to it and kind of hang on. So, I
think the comment was about like, how to treat somebody that's lower skilled than you respectfully. Like you guys were talking about, just rolling somebody. You get somebody mounted and you just roll over and pull them on top of you. Like
that was my big pet peeve.
That was your pet peeve,
yeah, that
right?
was my pet peeve.
That was kind of my comment. Was something similar to that. Like there's ways to do it and ways to roll and ways to do things where you're not disrespecting your partner. And
and you had mentioned you can use a less strong, like if you're using a certain form of mount that's maybe, let's say you're really good at grapevining. I'm elaborating here,
right?
But I've gone with people that are really good at grapevining the legs. I suck at it, but that can be shitty if someone's good at doing it. Well, if you're doing that and the person obviously has no clue, well then go to just a more standard mount and give them a chance to work their escapes on something that's a little less dominant.
Right. Or put your foot in a position where they can grab it. You don't have to hide your feet. If they're trying to do an up escape, you don't have to hide you don't have to put all your weight down on, the spots where they're trying to escape. You can make it so they can use technique and still escape without, making it ridiculously easy for them.
Yeah. So what are some funny stories, I always I ask guys like Chris, all the guys back in the day, like, what are some funny Paul stories? What are some funny, training stories with Jim or with Chris or with any of these guys? Because I feel like there's this era that younger guys like myself and Victor hear about, that the colored belts talk about. Like, I remember when the Knockout Fitness days or these days. So do you have any stories that you can share that are kind of on the record?
So back early on, I was still very shy and very unsocial. So I went to class and I hung around and I talked to people, but I didn't really get involved too much, after class and stuff like that. So I mostly watched. I can't think of anything specific. I think you guys talked about the old training and stuff where they just try to kill each other, and I don't really have anything too too good, I guess.
Well, maybe we'll jog your memory at some point, but it's when it comes to that training, like what? Because you've trained, I know you've gone to at least the origin camps. When it comes to, have you been to other jiu-jitsu camps?
So yeah, I haven't been to camps, but I used to go to seminars all the time. Anybody that I knew that was coming around, I would do the seminars and stuff. There wasn't really camps back when I started training. I mean, the origin one, somebody told me about. I think it was the second year that they were doing it. We were supposed to be going together, and he had to go. I think he got deployed, or he had to go to some Navy training or something like that, so he couldn't go. But that was the first time I went to a camp. That was like 5 or 6 years ago. No, maybe even longer. But I used to go to seminars all the time.
And did you what's your opinion of going to seminars? I went to a Globetrotters camp in Iceland, and I had a phenomenal time, but I also found that by Wednesday I was already hit my cognitive load. So did you feel like when you went to these seminars, granted it's like probably a one-day thing, were you able to bring stuff back and add it to your game?
Yeah, so I try to at least pick up one or a couple concepts from the training and from the seminars, but I tried to write down stuff as much as I could. I tried to film because it was only a couple hours. It wasn't as bad as going to a camp or anything like that. And usually the seminars, they would teach you a series or something like that. So it was a little bit easier going through the seminars, but even just learning 5 techniques, coming back and trying to do them, it was always tough. It's when you're doing it with somebody watching you and trying to do it right after you learned it, it makes it easy. But if you don't, it depends. I mean, the way I learn, I have to see it and I have to see myself do it. So I used to film myself a lot, so that helped. And I used to film as much as I could at the seminars if they let you. And I like to rewatch stuff and redo it and see myself do it. But most of the time it's overload. At some point it ended up being more of a photo opportunity. And you learn a technique or two, and then you get the photo opportunity.
Look at me and Puchecha over here.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And then repeat seminars when people come back to town. It's kind of the same thing, and you kind of just hang out. It's more the people that you meet and that you hang out with at these seminars. I met people from Tampa and from all around the state just going to these seminars and seeing them. So it's kind of more that for me, and meeting the legends of the sport and stuff like that. So
it's funny because you mentioned the videotaping. That's almost something. It's actually cropped up in my head a few times because recently I've been rolling, and I get into certain positions and I can't even really describe the position, but I'm like, I want to show Paul this, but I can't even describe it exactly because I'm probably missing he'll probably see, oh, this is what you're doing, and the fact that I can't even explain it properly is probably evident of why I'm having issues. So I'm almost kind of like, I want to be that guy now that sets up a tripod. Everyone's going to look at me funny, like, who the fuck is this guy?
I was that guy for a while.
So you said you had a notebook. I have a notebook. My main training partner, Victor, also has a notebook. What advice would you give Tommy as a white belt to help him in his jiu-jitsu journey moving forward? Or did you do everything perfectly?
I was pretty perfect.
You were pretty perfect?
No. Yeah, so definitely be more specific and be more detailed than you ever thought you could be. I go back and read my white belt notes and my. So I used to put it in my calendar. So every class I would write down every technique we did, every drill we did, everything like that. And I go back and read it now, and I'm like, I don't even know what technique this is. Trying to read it back now as a black belt. So. Assume that you don't know what you're doing, because you probably don't, and just be as detailed in whatever as possible. So
Chris has joined us, and he's putting beer in our faces at not even 10 a.m. And you have to teach class, so.
I do have to teach. I've got plenty of time. He's gonna drink the 9%er. I'm gonna do the lightest one.
Oh my. All right, fair enough.
Here we go.
I got a 4-pack over there for you too.
Did you really?
Yes, yeah.
Oh my god. Tommy.
I got a pregame for the beer fest, so.
Good to see you.
You too.
Awesome. I'm sorry I walked in so late. How long have you guys been at it?
We started at 9:30.
Okay.
So we've been going for a little over 20 minutes.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. There we go.
There we go.
All right.
So yeah, Tommy was kind of giving us a lowdown on what advice he'd give to his younger self, or just to any white belt that wants to improve, being that he is the technical wizard that he is.
Indeed.
No, not at all.
It sounded actually quite a bit like what you do on your own, Noah, right?
Well, I mean, he mentioned having a notebook. I have a notebook, and I try to just write down what we did during the day. But a lot of times if we're doing a sequence, like, for example, we're doing 50-50 escapes or passes, depending on how we're finishing them. We've been doing it for a month now. So a lot of times I'm writing same, and then the occasional detail, add this.
So that's very similar to what I did. So I had that all through my calendar. I actually still have it. It was in like a Excel spreadsheet now, but it was a Google calendar.
Did you ever go back and did you ever go back and reference it that much? Because I find I don't go back that much. It's the act of writing it that's important, not the what was it that we went back on.
Yeah, definitely the most important, I think, is just detailing it and writing it down and keeping track. And I try to go like I said, I tried to go back. I used to when we did like a blue belt review or something like that, I would go back and read it and try to pick up details. But like I said, if I wasn't super detailed, it's kind of a waste at the going back to it. But at the time, it definitely helped writing it down and stuff. And it really depends on how, like you guys were talking about in previous podcasts, how you learn. People learn different ways, and I was always repeat as much as I can and write stuff down as much as I can and see as much as I can. So
when did you start teaching here or helping Paul out? Like at what level? I'm not talking about year. I'm talking about what level.
It must have been middle purple belt probably when I came back. So I got hurt right before. I think people got their purple belt that were like a little behind me because I was hurt at the time. And then I moved to South Carolina for 10 months. And then I came back, and that's when I started training more, got my purple belts, and then like halfway through there was when I started helping teach, like being his partner, training dummy and stuff, and then started teaching.
What happened with that move, that excursion? Was that personal reasons, or what happened there?
Yeah.
Carolina, you come up?
Yeah.
Yeah, so my job, the company I worked for, they were based up in Maryland, and then the division that I worked for, they were based out in Goose Creek, South Carolina, and they decided to move our division up to Goose Creek to finish the project, and I basically either had to go up there or find a new job. So we all kind of took this 10-month contract and all moved up there, and I still have my house and stuff. Selectively, my team pretty much. Yeah, it was like there's probably 8 of us, I think, that they ended up moving up.
And you right now currently work as a software engineer, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm a software engineer too. That's
I
something
know,
else we have in common too.
I know. And we, since you've been training here, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Until you talked about it in the podcast.
Yeah, there are actually a couple software engineers that I know of. There's one that used to work at one of the old companies I worked at that no longer, I don't think, trains here anymore. But he was working up in Maitland too. So, yeah, they're nerd assassins everywhere, man.
Actually, my last project, one of the guys that trains here, I don't know if he's still around because I think he moved, but Victor, he was like sitting right next to me. I had no idea, and he came in as a blue belt, I think.
Oh, Victor Pagan.
Yeah.
Yeah. He just got his purple belt in June, right?
Yeah, he got his purple belt in promotions. I have not seen him since.
I've not seen him since.
I don't know if he's moved out of town or...
I think he's out of town. He told me he moved. He was still coming. Actually, I talked to him at that promotion, I think, and he was telling me that he moved, and I don't know how often he's coming or not, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen him.
I haven't seen him since. So. How much? So both of you guys are. I've just now discovered uber nerds. I'm one to talk, but how much do you feel as though the ways of learning, I guess epistemology, transcend both software engineering and jiu-jitsu, and how much is there sort of like a cross-pollination between the two that allows you to learn better or to break down things better? Is there any? I'm
not saying I don't know better, but it definitely lends itself to be similar enough that it's might maybe be easier. I don't know, just your style of the way you usually think and the way you learn. It's just similar enough that it doesn't take extra work to do, I guess.
Really?
I think software engineers inherently are problem solvers, and they like to solve problems. And jiu-jitsu is a problem-solving discipline. Like every time you're on the mat, you're confronted with a position. Like we take with two people of different dimensions in these interlocking positions, and that's like a fancy human Rubik's cube. So for many software engineers, it's very addictive. So I think that's lends itself that in a way maybe we were kind of slightly addicted to problem solving. So now you get confronted with jiu-jitsu, which is problem solving with this athletic component. So if you have any sort of athletic inclination, it even doubles it.
It's where life and death is.
Yeah, it's the struggle. It's the struggle. You're gonna cast your die, and I never played Dungeon and Dragon, but it's like, am I gonna roll above a certain number and succeed? Am I gonna be able to invert and take the guy's back, or am I gonna fail miserably and be smashed?
Dungeons and Dragons is like pure random chance, though, right? Like this is like
the more skill you have, the more dice you get to roll to hit the number.
Is that how it works?
At a very basic level, because I don't know the intricacies of Dungeons and
Sure,
Dragons.
it sounds like you don't know the intricacies.
Yeah, I'm like you're answering that awfully.
I've never actually played. I've played Dungeons and Dragons video games, so those encapsulate. And some of the old school games, like back in the day, actually did say dice in there, like this warrior will roll 3 dice when he attacks.
Are you talking about like the MS-DOS game where it's like you approach a door, hit 1, and it does some sort of random?
Not that far back. I'm thinking like Neverwinter
Did
Nights, like the original.
No,
because I remember floppy disks.
Do you remember playing that?
I remember floppy disks and stuff, and I remember BBSs. Man, I was on a BBS.
Were you really?
Yeah, that was crazy.
So for those who are under the age of, I guess 35,
Yeah,
everyone's like, "Who the fuck are they?" BBS. What is this?
It's like the original chat room, right? Like. Well,
yeah, you would get on your dial-up modem. Like, I can't believe God, I feel old now.
Awesome.
It's like you would use your dial-up modem and connect. And connect to. It would be a command prompt that would start spitting things out. Usually, like at welcome to such and such BBS, and you'd get
Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, and you'd have like a text menu where like hit 1 for this, hit 2 for this, And I remember being, quote, cool because I knew a few emojis. And that's when emojis were really complex. Not emojis, emojicons. Like where you didn't have actual emoji icons. You had to construct the faces with colons, semicolons, and parentheses. So I knew how to do Elvis with like a question mark for his hair and stuff. So like, they were like, oh, that's so cool and stuff. And this was life back then, just typing to strangers. By the way, I was probably 12 or 13. And I'm typing to a stranger in an internet chat room, and that was normal back then.
People get into strangers' cars nowadays, so I mean, like, how different is it really?
We roll with strangers in pajamas every day.
Exactly.
How is that not strange?
We're one tribe. Tommy, so what other? I know you have a multitude of other like hobbies.
I have some, yeah.
Yeah, like a lot of cool ones too, like scuba diving and whatnot. So what always brings you back to jiu-jitsu though? Because I know you're coming back soon.
Yes, very soon. Just the lifestyle of the people. I just love jiu-jitsu. I love the moves, and I just love learning technique and teaching. I love teaching the techniques. But really the people. I mean, I miss you guys.
Yeah, man. We miss you too a lot.
Hanging out here. I mean, I was here usually 5 to 7 days a week, and
Jesus.
you know, multiple times a day. So it's been different.
I need another partner to get smashed by Kali with
Oh, yeah.
at 6 a.m. It's getting a little tiresome, to be honest.
I just have to take that bullet every once in a while because
Please do. Brian McKenzie keeps him off me, but I can only do it for so long.
it's gonna be a while before I take that full strength. But
So what do you were talking about how vast of notebooks do you have dating back now at this point?
so I stopped taking notes for a while. So I probably have from my white belt to like middle blue belts,
Really?
pretty much almost every class. But then I pretty much stopped. But I started taping myself and the techniques and stuff. So yeah, so I actually have a lot of them up on YouTube in a private group for if you guys want to see some of them. But
You mean you might be able to upload them on the upcoming BJJ and Brews YouTube page?
no, maybe.
As Chris looks over at me, like, right?
Or perhaps in the private BJJ and Brews Facebook page / group. That's awesome. So, like, how much of your notebooks and your videos do you go back and actually reference? Like, when you've encountered a certain problem in grappling, because I find the nerd in myself, like, for example, like 2 weeks ago, Paul decided I'm just going to smash Chris for 5 minutes and mount and see what the hell he does, right? So I was like, God damn it, like, this sucks.
Yeah.
I immediately went and just started researching the hell out of mount escapes, right? Because evidently whatever I was doing for the past 15 years at this point wasn't working. You know, it works against other people, doesn't work against Paul. So I need to figure out what I need to do. Do you find yourself, when you're just like, God damn, there's a problem I just can't encounter, immediately going home and researching it and just like working on it? How much do you use like an external source? Because I know your subscription to like other video resources or your own notes and whatnot. Do you do?
Yeah, so I try to do that. It's kind of hard, especially as I'm teaching and stuff. When I was teaching classes, I was almost learning the stuff the way Paul was. Over the last 15 years, Paul taught, one technique, and pretty much every year, every time he taught it, something changed. Like he learned, he figured something different out. Even the basic mount escapes and stuff. Yeah. When we first learned them, he just said do this, and then the next time you actually learned a detail, and then once you got the black belt, then you start learning like the physics around it and stuff like that. And I do try to do that, and I try to like reference different sources and pick up details from different places and try to put it and make it my own. And if something's not working for me, try to figure it out by going back and looking at the references or looking at different sources and stuff. So I don't, it's hard to go back and look at my old stuff because it probably is not as good as my new stuff and what we just learned. But I'll look at it and reference it and see if I can pick up details and stuff. But I do like to go and look at the different sources and see, different mount escape. Like for your case, I would go look at people teaching different mount escapes and then try to figure out what would fit and what details Paul was teaching, and try to fit those into like different ways to do it that Paul might not think of, or that would be more effective the way Paul would be keeping me a mount or something like that.
So what I find hilarious with Paul is when I'd say maybe every month or every few months he'll diverge from the curriculum slightly and just teach a class, and I'll be sitting there, I'll be like, God damn, dude, you've been doing that to me the last 3 months. He's like, yeah. He's like, every once in a while I need to like trickle out what like some of the stuff I'm doing, like the tips from the top. Like, what was I really doing to mess you up? Because he'll teach lasso guard, and I'll go into lasso guard, and then he'll grab a grip that he never mentioned and shut everything down. I'm like, well, why didn't you tell me that grip, man? Like, this is not fair. Like, it's not fair, but it's like that's the levels to it.
So how much, like, that's interesting that you mentioned that so how much of that is, do you suppose he's working on his own thing, right? And then once he's sort of funneled you to that without really telling him, because that's the best way to learn, right? Or, you know, a way to learn is to sort of like develop that creativity, is to see how people who unknowingly are reacting a certain way. How much do you think is that, or is that he's just having fun at the moment? Like,
I think both, because I know he's told me that if he's trying something new, he'll first try to hit it on a white belt, then he'll try to hit it on a blue belt, then a purple belt, then a brown belt, and if he can hit it on a black belt like Tommy or Carpalucci, then he knows. But he's not going to try and do that right away, because like we talked about before, I like the term false negatives. It's like you'll get penalized and think, oh, I'm doing it wrong. You're not doing it wrong. You're doing it for the first time against someone of equal or higher skill. Do it against someone of lesser skill and see if there's promise to that move. And then as you start perfecting it, start trying to go against people of better and better skill level to see if it holds up.
oh,
So it's that, but it's also, he might not have thought of that at the time. And as he's teaching you these techniques and you're doing things correct in the way he taught you, he needs to figure out ways to beat that. So
right.
It's not necessarily that he didn't want to teach it to you. It's just that he's picking it up as he's going, and he might be learning it and trying new things and stuff like that.
He's seeing, what is the term that he uses all the time? Like, give him a look or something like that. Right? Like, he's seeing what looks you're giving him so that he can react properly.
Yeah.
So how much of, let me ask you, what do you feel, Tommy, has been you've been doing it for 15 years now? I just heard you say?
I think something like that.
Something like, either way, like decade and a half, like, so roughly the same time that I've been doing it.
I think it's like 13 years, 14 years, something
Is
like
it?
that.
Because you started at Goldenrod, right?
No, I started at Knockout on University.
Oh,
and
you're a knockout guy too?
University in 50, yeah.
Yeah, you missed the
Alpha.
origin story.
gosh.
We were talking about that before you came.
Wow. Oh, that's right.
So I started
Muay Thai, right?
So just Kick Punch Fitness.
Did you really?
Yeah.
So you're like you're the quintessential, like, perfect, like, marketing student, right? Like, the idea behind just the business end of it is to, empty stomach, haven't eaten since 7 o'clock yesterday. First meal of the day, a Kona lager. So you're the perfect business student, right? From a martial arts student standpoint. You come in for Kick Punch Fitness to get in shape. You're
Yes.
like, this is kind of fun, right?
No, I hated it.
You didn't think it was fun?
No, it was okay. It was good.
Okay, it was good, right?
Yeah.
But who was teaching it? Was it Paul? So he's probably working the hell
Seth,
out of you.
it was usually Seth, and there was, what's the name? There was another Muay Thai guy that was teaching it. The Lion.
Oh, James the Mad Lion?
Yes, he was.
Oh my God.
It was mostly him, and then Seth would fill in.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God. So James was just like 1-2s for an hour and a half straight, right? And you're
Basically.
like, fuck this. What are they doing over there?
Basically, I just stared. It was at the same time as jiu-jitsu. I just like be staring at jiu-jitsu in between rounds, and
then no, Bobby wasn't there yet, right? Because I was still training under Bobby at the time, right? Yeah, because he didn't
Yes.
come until after the fact.
so yeah.
So Mad Lion was making you do 1-2s for an hour and a half, and you're like, I'd rather go lay between another man's legs,
Yeah.
as Bobby would say. That's awesome. So you went straight from Kick Punch Fitness to Jiu-Jitsu?
Yes.
Wow. Not even any sparring or nothing.
No.
That's crazy. Okay.
I think, yeah. So I was always more interested in jiu-jitsu, or
were?
like the grappling and the wrestling and stuff like that. Like back in high school, my friends, we used to, rent the UFC videos and
At 16,000 movies?
What's that?
At 16,000 movies?
No.
No? Okay, never mind.
I think it was just
I'm really dating
Blockbuster.
myself.
I think it was just Blockbuster back down
fair
in Port St. Lucie. So
That's right.
yeah. And we used to leg lock each other and like grab a guillotine and be like, "Oh, just tap right away," because it was the ultimate move at the time, But I was just too like I told earlier that it was I was just too shy and too I didn't have enough confidence or anything like
Really?
that, and it's I just didn't want to. I was too afraid to go to class. Really, it was why I didn't do
To go
jiu-jitsu.
to like a group class of jiu-jitsu or just
Just
even,
a group class. Like I don't know why I came in and stayed for Kick Punch Fitness. To be honest,
really.
yeah.
So what was the singularity? At what point you were like, I'm gonna get in there, or have you already gone over this?
We kind of went over it
Yeah?
a little bit, but yeah. I mean, I came in. I knew Paul. We played softball a couple of years before.
No, but your transition from kick punch to jujitsu? Like, what were you like?
Yeah,
throwing the gloves down. I'm done with this.
it was like about a month in, and I just decided I'm gonna go do it.
Really?
Yeah.
So
Pretty much.
Was it that the kick punch fitness bored the hell out of you, or were you like, my curiosity about jiu-jitsu outweighed the boredom of kicking and punching?
I think it was that, and I probably got made fun of for doing kick punch fitness and not
the
doing
only guy in
jiu-jitsu.
class?
No, there was a
weren't?
couple,
Okay.
but not many. Yeah. I don't remember.
You still have those gloves too, I think. Didn't you?
I think I gave them to the gym, I think.
Were they the orange ones?
They were blue and red.
Venom, I think.
No, Venom did not exist. There were like
Combat-
3 brands, right?
I think it was Combat.
Combat Sports?
Yeah,
Like the
Combat
original-
Sports blue.
Oh
and-
my god.
I think it was like, it was probably the tough gloves at the time or something. I don't know.
That's awesome.
But
So were you? What was your? So we all sort of had like an evolution of like our own jujitsu. Like, where have you seen your game evolve? Like, where were you a lot? Like, what do you sort of classify yourself as? Because like right now, I can tell you probably most people classify me as like the butt scooter, and they classify Noah as the dreamy guy who beats up old women.
The boob puncher.
The boob puncher. Excuse me. Where is your evolution gone?
I wish I had an evolution. I don't know. I feel like I still don't have a game or an evolution. It's usually try stuff that doesn't work, and then no.
But that's the best way to learn, though, right? Like, because you get to see what works for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more of a guard player, I would say. You know, I like the open guards, but then it's funny because I never did a closed guard, but then about a year ago I started doing like closed guard exclusively and went back to it, and that's been my most successful stuff, you know. So I just try to evolve and just try to learn as much as I can and try as much as I can, which is good, but it also leads to not having like a strong game against top level people, because you're always trying stuff and you never perfect something and stuff like that. So I get bored really quickly. I don't like doing the same move. If it works, I move on, which is usually not a good way to, compete or do jiu-jitsu. But yeah, that's kind of my thing. I just try to learn and do as much as I can.
Who do you like watching in jiu-jitsu?
I really like the Mendez brothers. I like their style and the way they teach. And let's see. I go back to my origin guys, the De La Hiva guys up in Maine, and the way they teach, and the stuff that Paul, he's definitely the biggest influence. So,
what has your experience been? Because I have my thoughts on like quote like kind of the idea of like seminars and stuff. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on external learning like that, like going to camps, like very, very immersive camps? So you've been to one, right?
Yeah, and we were talking about this slightly. I was asking him, like I told him how I kind of reached a point on my week camp, like I was there for a week, that by Wednesday I felt like I hit a cognitive overload. And also that he's a guy that brings a lot of techniques back from these seminars and kind of filters out some stuff, but will share some of that stuff with a guy like Paul. And Paul will say, Tommy, might debate how much he actually does incorporate it, but Paul at least says, hey, Tommy brings in a lot of techniques and shares it with me. And I mean, most recently he was talking about a lasso pass. That quote, Tommy was really good at doing this, sort of thing. So, yeah, you've definitely made your mark in that respect on the gym.
How many seminars have you been to?
I don't know, maybe 20. Not counting the origin.
How many good pictures did you get?
I got a lot of good pictures.
So, who is like the biggest name person whose seminar you attended? You go through the who's who.
Carlo Laborio.
I see what you did there.
So, starting off, I used to go to seminar. Back then, seminars was basically the only way you could really learn outside of your school. Gyms were closed. Most gyms you couldn't just drop in and just take classes back then.
And the internet had not developed.
I mean, it was, but it wasn't like.
It's not that old. I mean,
No. But the jiu-jitsu on the internet had not developed.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, I am that old, but Yeah, when I started jiu-jitsu, the first thing I found really was the Grappler's Guide. Jason Scully, he was a brown belt, or he might even have been a purple belt at the time. I don't know, but he was the first one that really started
Invisible Jiu-Jitsu, baby.
Yeah. He started it, that's really where I started learning stuff on the internet. But I never really went to the internet for technique or anything like that. Okay. I tried to stay away from that as much as I could. Actually,
did you really?
The first thing I ever watched on the internet before I even did jiu-jitsu was BJ Penn 101s. He did a series of 101 jiu-jitsu videos, and I used every single technique he showed in that 101 in my first jiu-jitsu class.
Can you remember what they were?
Oh yeah,
really?
It was a whole series going from starting in close guard to getting like a scissor sweep, to going to mount, to like doing a cross collar choke, to escaping the cross collar choke, and like I think I did all. I escaped mount on like a brown belt at the time, my first class. I don't know if you remember Cankles. Yeah. He's like, "You've done this before," and I'm like, "This is the first time I've ever been on a mat," and I ended up using that technique, but. Those were the first videos I ever watched. But
shout out to John Morrison, by the way.
Yeah, John.
Is it Morrison or Morris?
Morrison.
Morrison.
Morrison. Yeah. So I mean, the camps. I started going to the camps. They let us video, so I videotaped every single technique, and I went back and reviewed stuff, and that was helpful. But at the same time, I probably learned 100 techniques that week for the 4 days or whatever, and I might have remembered 3 of them, or I might have used 3 of them.
Right.
So the way I like to teach or to use the camps and stuff is really just about the people and the relationships I've made.
Yeah, you've done a ton of networking, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a group of guys called we call ourselves the Horsemen, and it's a group of guys I met up at an Origin camp, and we now have traveled like all over the country to support each other. Back up to Boston, out to Lakeland. There's our friend Roger. He just opened another school out there, Warrior Combat.
Warrior,
yeah.
Yeah. Actually, one of my coworkers' daughters goes to the second Warrior.
So he's a guy that I've been going to camp with for the last 4 years, and we all traveled out there to support him. And there's other guys, but at some point the camps are great, but you're only going to learn so much, and it's really just outside of Paul, those guys, the instructors at the Origin camps that's the guys I go to first after Paul to ask questions or learn techniques from. And
but what you just described is like, to me, the holy grail. It's like you meet all these people, and now suddenly you have all these pins on your map where you can drop into gyms and train and then socialize, drink beers. All like that to me is there's a reason why this podcast is called BJJ and Brews, and I think for me personally, like that just sounds like that sounds like if I had any goals, like I'll get my black belt and then just travel around and drop into gyms for the next 5 years.
Why do you have to get your black belt first? Do it now, man.
I started doing that as a blue belt.
Did you really?
Wow, I was traveling
27 hours.
So for my job, I was traveling a lot, and I was training. So I was out in California for like 2 weeks at a time, and I would just drop in and just go to gyms and stuff. Any place I traveled, I try to drop in, pay a mat fee, buy a shirt, and just hang out for a week or so and do that types of stuff. And then same thing as seminars. I've been trying to go to seminars since then. I mean, at some point it got to be more of a meet this person, get a photo, and learn some. I would learn technique, but at that point, I wasn't going to add this these magical techniques to my game or anything. It was more just learning and meeting people.
In all of the drop-ins you've done, describe some of your awesome experiences as a drop-in student and terrible experiences. These are always fun.
For the
without naming names.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, it was always pretty good. There's only a few times that it was bad where I would go in and they would want some of the big schools.
Ryan Wilkerson.
No, I was always respectful, and I was always, if you've ever trained with me, I'm not aggressive, and I would never, like, I think Noah said it before, like, he wouldn't go and try to submit people. He wouldn't go and try to, like, kill the person that he's going with. Even if they weren't as good as me, it's probably a negative in my game where I accept things that I shouldn't accept, and, kind of let the other person be better than me pretty much almost every role type of thing. So I never had experiences where I would just get my ass beat.
I know Chris is like Chris is like eyeballing me. He's like, wait a minute.
I kind of need to have a chat about this.
He's like, this sounds like me a little bit.
Yeah.
What the hell?
It's definitely one of the biggest negatives in my game, and the way I train is I'm too nice, I would say, sometimes, and too respectful or too worried about the other person's feelings and their ego.
Are you guilty of apologizing to somebody and checking if they're okay
after
you sweep them?
Oh, yeah.
I want to see you guys roll now. I want to see.
Well, we just apologize
roll.
back and forth to each other. It's like
a Canadian roll.
Are you all right?
Oh, sorry.
Or you stop somebody's sweep and you're like, oh, sorry about that. That was really good. I don't know.
All right, so I want to go back. This is burning. You were saying Paul was punishing you, Chris, in mount, and you couldn't escape. What were you trying to do at the time? What were your mount escapes here? Let's talk shop on this, because I was going with him and I was in mount, and I got out and I had to ask him. I was like, "Did you give me that? Like what happened?" So I want to talk notes with you here.
Okay, so my gut reaction anytime somebody mounts me is I'm fairly good at elbow escaping, right? So I need to try to elbow escape, try to get them low on my hips, try to get my knees and elbows close together. Excuse me, and try to bring my elbows to my hips so I can try to sneak my knee in at the proper angle, that sort of thing. I try, and it's a fault of my game too, is I try to do as little explosion as possible, and I know, like, bucking and trying to oopa my way out, but and it's a fault of my game too, where I just don't go for things. Is I always assume that the person knows what I'm going to do. So I don't try to oop as much as I should to try to off balance. Because, the last thing I want to do while I'm rolling with somebody is to be accused of, the fucking wild douchebag.
See, now Tommy's grinning over there.
So you've gone through this, I assume, right? How often do you encounter that mental block that keeps you from executing because you're arguing with yourself, saying, this guy knows that I'm going to do this, so I'm not going to do this?
Yeah, so I don't really do that. So that's one thing I don't do too often. It's more than me. If I do something and I don't do it 100% correct, I punish myself. If I do something 75% and it kind of works, I'll punish myself and give it up because I feel like I didn't do it 100% correct, so I don't deserve to get it. So I'll stop.
Okay. I know exactly what you're talking. Do you have this ideal platonic of each technique in mind, and if it's not, the sequence isn't perfect and this is the most beautiful technique you can do at that moment, you punish yourself, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Okay, we need to
that's the thing about jiu-jitsu is it's never going to work 100%, and it's never going to be. It's not if you're going against somebody that's either more skilled than you or equally skilled as you. Most of the time, it's not going to be that pretty, and it takes some effort to do something. And if it takes effort for me, I usually give it up because
And that's my thought, right? And this is something that Dean talked to me about a long time ago, as he said to me, I was like, he's like, sometimes techniques just, they need to be ugly.
Yeah.
Right? Did you do a traditional martial art before?
Never.
Really?
No.
Because I'm gonna blame Taekwondo on this, is that there's supposed to be ideal techniques where everything's supposed to be mechanically proper and this and that and anything, and if it requires strength, then it's not true jiu-jitsu, and maybe there's something to that. I don't, but what is it, Paul? Is it Paul who said technique above all, but strength matters also?
Oh, 100%.
But then you hear, and this is a little bit that sort of hero worship that comes in, is you hear, Helio Gracie, and I don't know whether they're real or not, but you see these fucking memes that with a black background and Helio Gracie holding his belt in front of his nuts, saying technique or jiu-jitsu should require no strength at all, and I can do this as a 95-year-old man, or whatever the hell it is, right? and maybe I buy into that hype a little bit, that there is this idealized jiu-jitsu.
Or what was that documentary? I think it was called Roll, where Chris Howder is talking about how Hickson would take all the pressure in side control and focus it on one, like on like the tip of a needle. Like he'd make his shoulder like tip of a needle and drive it right into like the ideal like on your clavicle, your chin, and just like keep you pinned. Focus all that energy like a crashing wave. I want to be an avalanche of snow, a crashing wave.
How much of that is mythology, do you feel, and how much? I mean, like we're just kicking. I'm drunk at this point. So, what are your thoughts on that, Tommy? Explain.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know. It's both, you know. Like there definitely takes some, you know, strength, and there's no way going against an unskilled opponent. Yes, you can do no strength and you know, do those things, but against any person that's trained, you need to use some kind of strength for the most part, you know.
Or not even strength, just like athleticism. Right?
Athleticism,
like,
right? At some point, that two equally skilled people, if somebody's more athletic or going harder, they're usually going to be in a better position. You know, it's just physics.
See, I think what ends up happening is I think people put too much outside of just having basic cardio, which I think is essential. I think the fitness side of jiu-jitsu only really should only be a concern of a student's mind as they get into the really high levels, because I think the quickest way to improve is not through physical fitness and getting stronger, but just training more and getting superior technique. It's only when you're at a high level technically and your opponents are at a high level technically, now you're going to get big. Now the significance of being in better shape, being a little stronger, will be more noticeable because you can't make such rapid gains or such significant gains just by technique. But if you're a blue belt like myself, it's like I feel like I could lift weights 3 days a week, but I'm probably better off training 3 more hours that week and learning more technique, because I improve so much quicker right now because I'm a blue belt, and technique is just that's the way to get better. Just I can work on my De La Riva sweep, I can work on X guard, getting into X guard, I can work on all these other cool things. You have to have cardio, you know, and you do have to have some strength. So maybe I'm taking for granted that I'm not out of shape to begin with, but outside of just being in basic shape and having decent cardio, I would say just train.
Yeah, I mean,
Chris is still thinking about Tommy being his spirit animal and like and how it's like how you getting. So this is the dilemma. I feel like this is the dilemma with you guys. It's like you guys have Kali on top of you, making your life miserable, and you're still thinking about, I hope I don't hurt this guy, so I'm not going to explode.
No, that's exactly it, right? I mean,
I think that's fucked up because that guy's already like he's like the first stone has been cast. So are you going to be a glutton for punishment? I'm looking at you, Chris. I'm not looking at Tommy. I'm looking straight into Chris's eyes. Are you going to be a glutton for punishment and be miserable? Or are you going to do something about it? Because guess what? He's already kind of shown to you through his actions how much he cares about. And I'm not using Kali as a bully here. Kali's a great guy. But I mean, that opponent is telling you how much he or she values your body because they're making you pretty damn uncomfortable.
That's an interesting question. I won't compromise my care for my training partners regardless of their treatment of me. Honestly, I don't. It's like it's. I mean, it's just one thing I don't compromise on. Like if the tap matters to them that much, then I don't. I'm gonna do everything within my knowledge, my scope of knowledge to technique my way out of it, but I just often won't. More often than not, probably 95% don't explode into things. I don't. I mean, like you've rolled with me enough at this point. Like you can tell, like I always keep like a steady pressure.
What about what about frames? Like I would argue that certain frames are uncomfortable on your opponent.
But so like frames to me are sort of the pulling the lever to let. So like there's like that like philosophical like sort of thought experiment of like there's like a track that splits into a Y, and there's like one person, and then 4 people on the other side of the track, and like you. If you pull the lever,
this is the sociopath
yeah,
quiz.
exactly.
It's like, are you a sociopath or not? This is that quiz.
Yeah, so like if you pull the lever, then it's gonna hit like, or if you leave the lever alone, it's gonna hit like 4 people. But if you pull the lever, it'll hit like the one person, right? So it'll like kill 4 versus 1. So it's like a very like sort of statistical, like sterile. You know what? It's pure math. Just let the one person go. Versus like there's one track and 4 people on the end of it, and a barreling like cart coming at them, and you're standing next to a giant fat dude above the track, and like, could you push the guy and make him stop the cart and let him die to like in lieu of like the 4 people dying? I'd be the type of person that's like, I'll pull the lever. In essence, I'll make the frame and let it kind of happen to them versus pushing the dude.
I had a good point to say, but then you got me all confused with this mumbo jumbo about hypothetical trains and obese people and stuff like that. Okay, so here's my example.
Like the inevitable.
Here's my example. Like, Justin, our buddy Justin. Yes. Okay, Justin. For those of you who don't know, those of you who know who Justin is, you'll get this story.
Your neck knows Justin.
Yeah, Justin is the guy. Justin's the guy who shows up to gi class wearing a t-shirt and shorts. He's been training for many, many years. He doesn't give a shit about technique, but he loves grabbing people's heads and popping them off. Like, he will turn you into a Lego head and pop it off. Now, and he's very skilled with his submissions. It's just he doesn't give a shit about anything else. He will be in my guard, and he will try to can opener me. Okay? Mm-hmm. All right. I would like to know what your reaction is. Here's my reaction.
My reaction is to open my guard.
Okay,
because that's the solution, right? If he's in your guard and they try
but I'm like, you're gonna do that? F you! I'm gonna take both my fists and jam them in either side of your carotid artery.
We're going back to the tit for tat thing.
But it's not. But I'm not escalating. I'm framing very aggressively with my fist. I'm not punching him. I'm not doing a Tex Johnson.
You frame with your fists where?
On his throat, on his jugular, and that gets him to break it. Because guess what? He's not even doing clean jiu-jitsu, as you like to say, like the cleanest. He's cranking the F out of my neck. You know what I mean? If he goes north-south, what's an actual defense for a north-south? A late defense for a north-south?
Okay, tap.
No, Nick Paul showed me you take your fingers or your fists and you get it right on their neck.
That's not jiu-jitsu.
It works.
It's not jiu-jitsu.
Oh, come on! What do you mean that's not jiu-jitsu?
That's like
what's jiu-jitsu?
That's some weird Krav Maga. Like there's got to be a better way, right? Like there's got to be a better way. In my opinion,
my point is it's not.
Batman should not kill the Joker. There's got to be a better way.
No, my point is less to do with whether it's jiu-jitsu or not. My point is I have to defend myself. And if you're basically, in my opinion, handcuffing yourself for some sort of higher value, like for some self-righteousness or something here, at the expense of your own body, that could have short or long-term effects.
But I'll just tap. Yeah, that's the thing.
So, is he defending? Is he not defending himself, or is he just moving on and going to the the next position and trying again? So is it his ego that's being hurt by not defending himself and jamming his thumbs into somebody's throat, or is it your ego that's being hurt by
insecurity there? Is there a little insecurity, Noah, that you just feel like
it's not insecurity?
I can't let a can opener beat me.
No, it's competitive. That's what it is.
That's what it is.
It's competitive.
I don't care about not tapping as much as he cares about.
Exactly. Yeah. That's.
Oh, so now you're gonna make me feel bad. You guys are above it. We're Buddhists here. We've transcended. The world is suffering. Jiu-jitsu is suffering. We've accepted that. We've transcended, and now we're in nirvana. And meanwhile, I'm here still trying to get my wins and losses here on the mat.
Losing in jiu-jitsu, you win or you learn, Noah. I learn a lot. You win or you learn.
So what were you trying to do to get out of mount? You basically taught an elbow escape lesson. But what were you actually doing? Trying to elbow?
I was trying to elbow escape. So he would sit there and he'd S-mount me with onto my right side with his left foot propped up, or excuse me, his right foot propped up at my hip. I tried to invert my left knee to try to elbow escape that way, but his foot was at my hip, so I tried to weave my knee to where the crook of his knee is to try to elbow escape that way, but then he would just flatten me out again.
Did you ever try the? You're gonna laugh at the two fists on the hip escape, which he does teach.
You mean to
frame
to frame and then stick my feet in there and like vibrate my way out of it?
No, you. He teaches this. This is one of the 4 escapes that he teaches in class, where you go both fists to the hip pocket on either side. You bridge, and then when you drop your hips, you push
explode.
with you kind of explode to try and free your hips.
I mean, I don't think I would have in that because
once you get to S mount, not once you get to S mount, but before that. Did he have his legs crossed?
He didn't have
low.
his grapevines. No, he didn't have.
He didn't have
top full guard.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I know I should have upa'd, to off balance him, create kazushi, and then rock my legs back and forth to do the Nick Paul escape.
No, don't do that. He will mock you if you do that one.
It's something I'm gonna have to go back to the well at again and again and again.
Maybe you should have videotaped your roll.
I should have. But I'm taking mental notes, right? Like I know what I did last time, and I didn't try inverting my knee and trying to elbow escape that way. And it's, I don't know. I mean, like I remember Paul saying, like, I'm always looking to see if you're doing the right thing or the wrong thing. Maybe I just keep doing the wrong thing, and I just need to keep trying. So
I think what's one thing I believe about jiu-jitsu, I think this is true about a lot of stuff. Okay, Chris has to go to the bathroom, but go ahead. This is what happens when you drink beer on an empty stomach before 10 a.m. Anyway, I like to think that one of the most frustrating things about learning, and I'm going to use jiu-jitsu as the example here, is failing and not knowing why. And I think that's something that a lot of black belts suffer, or anybody. I mean, it's not a white, but definitely white belts. But I think a lot of times, if we know, like in Chris's case, like Chris did not get out of mount, but he knows of all these things he could have done to try. That makes him want to go back and roll with Paul or someone else again. Whereas if you don't know why you failed, you're kind of just stuck there with this look on your face like, well, this isn't fun. Like, I don't know. Like, it's fun to know the reasons, even if you don't succeed, because at least you have something to aim for.
That's how I view it. Learning, trying to figure out why it didn't work or what I could do to fix it or to do that. The problem really comes when people don't care why it didn't work, or they just, You're
talking about as students, they don't care?
Yeah, or just anybody. I mean, not even just as, just as students or a practitioner even. I know black belts right now that try something, it doesn't work, so they just stop and just go back to doing the same thing that they've been doing. And for me, that's I don't feel like that's not the way I want to do jiu-jitsu. So stuff like that, not caring or not wanting to know why something failed becomes a problem for me.
What have you seen get added to jiu-jitsu just in the time you've been training it?
Get added?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, for example, I would imagine leg locks when you first started were probably not as commonplace as they are now. I'm taking a guess. Or maybe not, because Nick Paul told me Seth Petroselli, one of the first things he showed was like a running toe hold. Open, like, this is how you pass the guard. You go for a rolling toe hold.
Evidently, what Seth Petroselli taught that.
That's what I just said.
That's what ridiculous.
But I was asking Tommy. I was like, so have you, what changes? And Chris, you can answer this question too, because you've been training, for an equally long amount of time. It's like, have you seen change? Yeah, have you seen changes in jiu-jitsu over that time period? And I use the example of maybe the more prevalence of leg locks, but that's just, I'm throwing that out there as a guess.
I mean, usually, for the most part, it's driven by competition. So as the rules of IBJJF have changed, or as top-level competitors change, that's usually what drives the new stuff for the most part. I mean, 50-50 came around because people started using it in competition, and that's kind of drove what people were learning off of YouTube, learning off of these new instructors. So it's competition drives it a lot. Like lasso guards started coming around more often. I mean, it's stuff that's been around, but either people didn't use it or people didn't teach it because it wasn't pretty jiu-jitsu at the time, or it wasn't traditional. So as people started going away from traditional stuff, that kind of just becomes more popular. It's kind of what's popular at the time, and it's usually driven by competition for the most part, I think.
What's traditional? Because I think this is what's funny is I've been training just under 2 years. I just know the snapshot that I've seen now. What was traditional jiu-jitsu for you guys when you started, or when you guys were blue belts?
I mean, for me, everything you learned as a white belt was very traditional. There's some more details or more a couple changes to it, it's evolved obviously, but I mean the techniques for the most part were the traditional techniques, and that's what we were learning even up until purple belt and stuff like that. It was very repetitive back then. You probably did like your blue belt test was probably the same stuff we were doing and learning as a purple belt, just adding to it, or you had to one technique from De La Riva instead of 3 techniques, but you probably have learned them all that I learned as a purple belt at the time.
I would say, just along the lines of what Tommy was saying, I think we were taught in a very sort of like linear fashion of like first this, then this, then this. Yeah. So, and I'm still guilty of behaving that way on the mat versus this sort of more mind-mapped approach to learning. I would say the biggest evolution in jiu-jitsu is sort of transcends just the technique end of it and like what sort of is trendy and popular at the time, but it comes to more of the way it's taught. The environments of the gyms, I feel, have evolved considerably. And I'm not trying to put a moral component on it, whether it's right or wrong, but just to say that it's gone from a very sort of attrition based, like who sort of just sticks around because it's just tough, hard, like training, and if you're either dumb enough or tough enough to stick around, then you do, and you learn from it, which I think in turn sort of could have produces a little bit of like a survivor bias, and versus we very well could have lost the greatest jiu-jitsu player along the way because of that, and as sort of like modern athletics, the coaching methods have been integrated into jiu-jitsu. I think it's improved training, like a better onboarding process, as you and I have discussed a lot of times, to focus on sort of like movement and to focus on the more of the meta of jiu-jitsu versus like, week 1, all just self-defense. Week 2, close guard, scissor sweep. Week 3, and just sort of like dumping somebody into whatever curriculum is going on at the time with the expectation of like, we're going to show you where this fits into it big picture. I think that's a big part of how jiu-jitsu has evolved over the years here.
Yeah, definitely the style of teaching. I mean, it really depends on where you go too. If the school or the instructor doesn't want to evolve, it's very similar to the way it was back then. Even a couple of years ago, I was at places where it was very similar to how I started training. It's like, but as the businesses grow, as the sport evolves and the martial art evolves, it really depends on how you want to teach. Do you want to have retention and grow your school and grow your business, or do you want to be considered the tough gym and have
15 guys on the mat.
Yeah, that are really tough. That
yeah.
may not know all the techniques, but they're tough. It's the style of the sport and the business.
When you were training coming up, was it more like tough guy cream coming to the top sort of thing, or had they already moved beyond that a little bit?
It's a little bit of both, but so I pretty much did just submission grappling and jiu-jitsu coming up. So at the time, they started adding more of the MMA classes, so that's kind of where the cream of the crop kind of mentality was more based out of. So in jiu-jitsu, I didn't really have to worry about getting crushed and just getting destroyed. Like that was more the MMA side. So I never had to deal with that too much. I mean, people were definitely rougher and stuff like back then, and it definitely, smoothed out a little bit. But I never had to deal with that mentality of I'm just the instructor's just going to crush you for an hour, and if you stay around,
How much how much of the time early on were you doing gi versus no gi? Like, what was the breakdown percentage wise?
I think it was about 50-50 for me, just because one day it was gi, one day it was no gi. So if I came 4 days a week, I was doing one of each probably. Back then the schedules were a lot more open, so there wasn't as much opportunity to do gi like every day, stuff like that. So back then it was you paid for one program and it was gi and no gi type of thing. You didn't really have the opportunity to do separate
Now,
programs.
when you did it, did you guys have the colored shirts that I hear about? Explain to me that like I've heard about this cursorily, but I've never had someone explain this to me. But I understood there's some sort of ranking. But the cool thing is, I believe there's like a camo rank, or someone had got to wear camo.
I have one still.
You have one?
Yeah, I'll bring it in next. I'll bring it in next week.
Okay, so someone explained to me how that worked. Where did this happen? Was it a knockout fitness thing? Where did this occur?
So for me, from what I remembered, it was when we moved over to Goldenrod.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was we had the different programs, and they instituted different colored shirts for the no gi grappling or submission grappling. So people that didn't do gi, they would be ranked to be separated by. Back then, it was to separate who was learning what techniques and stuff like that.
But what were the colors? Because it wasn't it wasn't blue. There was
orange.
Like I saw a picture, and I saw a picture of a really young collie like standing in the back. I think you might have posted a pic.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn, look at all these faces. But it wasn't like traditional jiu-jitsu belt colors. It wasn't like white shirts, blue shirts, purple shirts, brown shirts, black shirts. It was like I saw camo, I saw yellow. I was like, what the hell's going on here? It was like,
so camo were the instructors, right? And the idea is that camo was supposed to be. This is so cheesy.
yes.
So I'm a little bit more inside baseball because I was involved in just sort of like, not the planning of it, but I was just, I helped teach a couple classes here and there back in the day. The idea of camo was that like it's supposed to integrate all of the colors, right? Which realistically, if you like physics, that's white, right? Like all of the colors. But either way, so like,
or if you mix them with crayons as a kid, it looks like vomit.
Yeah. But so camo is supposed to be representative of all the colors. So the instructors wore camo. And I believe because they decided to go with sort of like karate ranks, which is why you saw like orange and green and stuff in there. And this is before they were implementing the green belt system to get more money out of people. Not at our gym. Within the jiu-jitsu belts, so that's where you see like the goofy colors, not goofy, the extra colors.
Okay, Tommy, do you concur with that?
From what I remember, yeah. I mean, so for submission grappling, it was more. I think it was closer to the belt colors, from what I remember.
And the MMA
and then the Muay Thai.
Kickboxing, yeah.
Oh, that's different. Right, because they had ranks for all those disciplines.
Yeah.
It wasn't just submission grappling. It was also Muay Thai and MMA.
I mean, the idea is to keep you motivated, right?
I've heard horror stories from the MMA test.
Oh, the first one.
When people were getting...
It was basically... So the first MMA test... so when I joined ATT from the other gym, I came with Bobby, and there was a big... And at that point, they had split off between ATT Orlando, located at Dean University, and they opened up and expanded to ATT Longwood, which is its sort of like own entity now. I actually went with Longwood because I live closer to that area, so I could help out over there. And I actually started the kids program over there with Joe Pernia. And so for the first big like sort of ceremonial belt testing / like end of the year party type of thing, they set up a smoker basically between MMA students from Dean University and Longwood, and it was basically just a pro fight with like all your friends and family watching, where people were getting knocked out. I remember at one point Kenny was, I think, testing for some MMA rank, and he ended up sparring with Paul, and Paul beat the shit out of him. Some of it because it was everybody just didn't know better at the time, but a big part of it was because it was Kenny.
Right.
And dude, it was like a mauling. So it was like, so you weren't there?
I think I was. Yeah.
It was a very green group of instructors. Let's just say, and it's evolved considerably since then, just to make it a more proper tribe-like atmosphere and a less competitive atmosphere on a joyful day.
Yeah, I've heard things
Again,
of people getting their bells rung and stuff.
That was like 11
that.
years ago too, by the way.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
exactly. like literally.
And it's funny because I found out about this indirectly through a second story where Julius invited Paul to his promotions, and for whatever reason, Julius had a guy up for his blue belt, and he gave Paul one of this guy's challenges on that day was to have sort of like street scenario takedowns.
What?
So kind of like self-defense takedown
man.
scenario.
So I was there at this, and
Oh yeah,
please,
he gave. So I'll give my side, then Tommy can give his side. This is the recount Paul told me, and then you can give me the spectator account. So Julius goes up to Paul and gives him some gloves, and he says, this guy's gonna try and take you down." And Paul's like, "Well, what do you want me to do? You want me to knock him out?"
my God.
So what Paul told me is he went out there. The guy looked kind of scared because he's like, this is black belt. I've got cauliflower, all this stuff. And he said, "Look, man," he's like, "I'll let you work, but you ain't taking me down. There are too many people here watching." So that was my side. So what did you?
that was pretty honest recount of the occasion. It was yeah. Luckily, my knee. I think I was hurt at the time, so I couldn't do it because he asked me to do it too, and it would have been. I don't know. It was good, but it was very odd to have a black belt instructor. Your instructor give a blue belt test to somebody that he never met in his life, and with boxing gloves on, and be like, "Oh yeah, try to take this guy down," and yeah, it's very
Who also was an MMA fighter too. It's
Right.
Like a professional.
Right.
It's like you might have a chance against some people that don't do takedowns or don't strike, but this guy actually has done it all.
So do you think? So I wonder what the sort of genesis of that was. Like, do you suppose that's sort of like a play on, not a play off, but he kind of got that idea from
the
like
Gracie,
the Gracie combative?
Yeah,
Okay, all right.
I think so. And I mean, at the same time, he does teach that a little bit more. He has people coming to him that are coming from karate or something like that, or their kids are in, and they want more of the self-defense style. So they're not necessarily focused only on the sport as much as we are. And he's a little bit more traditional. He comes from more of a traditional karate or martial art background. So he tries to teach that. So just his style is a little different. And I mean, Paul's talked about doing similar stuff like that. Like if you're a black belt in jiu-jitsu, you should be able to defend yourself against punches and stuff like that. And
You should.
I've never had to. Like I've never gone.
That's the ultimate jujitsu.
Right.
Well, I think a solid blue belt should be able to defend themselves against most people.
Yeah, agree. But so, I mean, because Paul did that that one seminar. Did you do that? Like
I was there for that.
The Jiu-Jitsu with Hits seminar.
Yeah.
That should be a part of our curriculum. Is it a part of the white belt curriculum? I don't even know.
It is. It's on the blue belt test. It's taught maybe twice during the year. It's something that at best we get 2 weeks to look at. So it's always the thing that the students get a little crash course on it from Paul when they have questions, because they get their sheet of paper. Congratulations, you've been nominated. These are the techniques you need to know. And that self-defense portion usually throws everyone for a loop, because they're like, I've never done that. Funnily enough, the people that would do very well on it are the kids, because the kids practice all the, like, how do you get out of a schoolboy? We don't practice that, but they practice that all the time. So a lot of the self-defense stuff is really... So Victor was very, like, because Victor helps out with the kids class, he's like, shit, I know all these techniques because we do them with the kids. And that's what Paul teaches a lot of times. So just because, I guess, again, the business aspect of it, something that comes up a lot, it's like, what's ideal for development, what's ideal for retention? They're not always the same thing, you know? A lot of people are just happy to roll, you know?
Which is great for retention.
Yeah, I mean, which is great for retention, but is it the best for development?
Class, so
yeah.
Chris Vu signing out.
All right. And I think you're supposed to be on the other mat, so just FYI, you're gonna keep things on that mat. I think.
Just so we don't have to
yeah,
do.
exactly.
It's funny, Chris. I meant to tell you, you're one of the first guys I ever followed or like met online before I ever actually even met you.
Really?
So I recognized you from your
Which forum? Sherdog?
Yeah, Sherdog and
Really?
MMA. What was it? MMA. What was it? What's the Orlando?
Was it?
What's the Orlando forum that was, or a Florida forum?
Oh my god!
It was like MMA. Just
There
the
was-
main MMA one.
There was one that was like sub fighter.
I think that's what maybe. I don't know.
So there was sub fighter. I think Gracie Baja actually made one at one point.
Yeah, I think
Was it one of those? Man, so I've been.
your avatar was you on a gorilla's back, and
Oh
you were
my
much,
God.
much heavier at the time. And
Internet celebrity.
before you even came to Goldenrod, I was following you and talking to you
Really?
online. Yeah,
What was your handle?
I don't know. I don't
Really?
remember.
What was your screen name?
I probably
did I,
didn't-
did
I
I
probably
ever
didn't post
mistakenly
much.
type ASL question mark to you? If I do, I'm sorry. All right. See you guys.
See you guys.
All right, so I had a question that I was actually looking at the. We have our little set of plaques up on the wall with all the black belts. Tommy's one of them, and I was looking at that while you guys were talking. And I realized that, with a couple exceptions, but for the most part, most of those guys have aspirations or already have open gyms. A couple guys have not. But a lot of guys, Julian, Julius, these guys have
Dylan,
opened.
yeah.
Dylan, do you have any interest in opening a gym?
Not in the sense of, I mean, I do. I enjoy teaching. Not as a career, I don't think. I mean, maybe if I could eventually make a career out of it, I would. But no aspirations of actually like owning and being the owner of a gym. You know, I wouldn't mind running a gym and being a head instructor type of thing, or being a head instructor under somebody. But not really of owning a gym in that sense.
Okay, so head instructor, teaching all the time, yes, but
Yeah.
but doing the nitty gritty of the books and that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Not
I
so
mean,
much.
it's. I feel like I'm still learning, and I don't really have the knowledge to do that, and I don't have a plan to be able to do that at this time. So maybe if I learned and I come up with my own, my own style or own ideas and stuff, that I'd be more willing to do it. But at this time, I'm still just learning as much as I can. And
Do you think if you started working full time, it would take some of the luster off, like out of jiu-jitsu? Like, is it? Because I've kind of debated that. I'm like, is it nice to have critical, like, separation of church and state, so to speak? It's like, I have my job, and we all bitch about our jobs. That's just human nature.
Yeah.
Like, but I will never bitch about jiu-jitsu because it's not my job. It's my, I won't say haven, because I do enjoy my work, but I had one of my neighbors, or former neighbors, is a yoga instructor, but she told me she would never make yoga instruction her job. She's been a teacher in like the public school
right.
system, and she's like, because I don't want to tarnish the purity. And now I feel like she's being kind of very yogi of her, right? I don't want to tarnish the purity. I would never charge for yoga or anything. But I get it. I get where she's coming from, and I thought it was very mature to actually just come out and just say that. It's like the minute something becomes a job, for practical reasons, a lot of other stuff come into play that you don't have to worry about if you're not, if it's not your job. Like, do you ever think that? Do you think that if you did jiu-jitsu as a vocation, even not as a gym owner, which obviously has a bunch of overhead,
Right.
but even just being an instructor, would that take some of the luster off? Is it better to just be a student, in your opinion? For you personally, not better. I'm just saying better for you.
Yeah. So as your goals change, it kind of changes. Even as a purple belt, once I started teaching more than taking classes, like especially brown belt and then eventually black belt, where I was being more the teacher than like a student, and I was running the classes myself. I mean, I could definitely see my quote game suffering. Like you're drilling less. If you only have a certain amount of hours to put on the mat and you're teaching half of them, you might be conceptualizing the techniques better, but performance and doing the techniques live definitely suffers a little bit. So I could see it in that case, but I don't think tarnishing the idea of it or anything like that. I wouldn't be worried about that as much.
What about? Do you think it should be a requirement for? I don't know whether it's purple or brown, but for someone on their journey to get better to have to teach? Like, do you think, like, let's make it simple. Do you think an obligation of brown belts in order to get their black belt is to start teaching?
I don't think an obligation, but I think it's definitely, I mean, it's kind of case by case, Some people perform better, some people teach better, some people just roll live better, It's just, it's kind of up to your instructor to kind of push you in the direction that they need to, like, evaluate you. If there's some people that if they want to get promoted to brown belt, maybe I would make them teach, like to see if that's kind of the course and they understand the techniques. They might not be able to perform them live as well against like, a more skilled opponent, but I may make them teach it and see if they know it. It's
well, I mean,
definitely
how do you view that whole thing? Because it's like Chris and I have talked about this and we've debated this, where it comes down to what's the criteria for different belts and that sort of thing. Hang on. Well, I'm saying hang on to the thing, but Victor's saying goodbye. You out of here?
Hello.
All right.
Goodbye.
Have a good weekend, man. I got you. Yeah, I got you.
I mean, it's definitely a mix. It's. I don't really put emphasis on one over the other. I mean, my preference is knowing the techniques and being able to teach the techniques over maybe performing them at the highest level. Like, I don't know. Like a black belt that can teach and knows all the techniques, he might get beat by, a competition brown belt or a purple belt a lot, going live and, maybe not get submitted, but they might, lose a quote jiu-jitsu match, It's just, it's a balance. I think if I put more emphasis on the total package than, one specific course.
So you think that's kind of up to the instructor to sort of see how each student is kind of blossoming and to kind of evaluate them on that criteria and not have this kind of universal, I don't know if it's MMA math or jiu-jitsu math. It's like A beats B, B beats C sort of thing and doing things. Okay.
Yeah, there's definitely several different criteria, and one person might be better in several of them and still might, lose a match. It doesn't mean that they're not a black belt. In my the way I feel, maybe the old school. I probably wouldn't be a black belt in the old school, not sense. Like just go out there and beat
just
somebody.
Scrap,
yeah,
bro.
Just
just scrap.
But I don't know.
So if you weren't doing jiu-jitsu, what would you be doing?
Right now, I'd be I don't know. So it's taken so much of my life. I don't know what I would be doing.
Like, what other hobbies do you have? I know. Did you play soccer when you were younger?
Yeah. So I grew up playing soccer, baseball, and then soccer. I've played all my life, pretty much the last 35 years. I've played baseball, and then 30 or 33 years I played soccer, and then I I picked up scuba diving, so I scuba dive a lot, and then just recently got into fishing and kayaking.
Oh, wow. You need to move to Colorado, man.
I know. I like hiking and stuff like that.
Did you find that growing up playing soccer and baseball helped you when you started doing jiu-jitsu in your 20s?
No.
Really?
Not really.
I'm not talking about like, I have hand-eye coordination, but just the fact that you've already learned a sport and you know your body, you feel like that didn't give you any sort of advantage when you're doing jiu-jitsu, or you just...
Not really. I mean, I was in okay shape, but other than that, I could have come out, it was a totally different thing.
So you don't think any of that carried over? Like none of those movements, or just even having athletic base? I want to try and convince you on this. It's like
a little.
What position did you play in baseball?
Shortstop, second base. Yeah.
Okay, so when the pitcher's about to pitch the ball, that stance you're in to get ready, that's kind of a combat base, right? Like you're kind of doing a squat.
I guess
right?
in that sense, the athletic stance helped, but if I wrestled, it would have been a lot better.
Yeah. I won't argue that.
So growing up, I always had an athletic base, and I always even like just wrestling with friends and stuff. I never wrestled in my life. Actually, I wrestled for 1 week when I was a freshman in high school. The coach wasn't even there, and they just had us wrestle, and I tried to do a WWE move to pin somebody, and they all laughed at me, and then I pretty much went to soccer after that. But it was athletic wise. I mean, I was always good at sports, so maybe that carried over. But the I don't know, the specific sports I don't think mattered. I think just being athletic and being involved and stuff helped.
I know you got to get to a beer garden and a beer fest and all that good stuff, and we've already had a beer, so you'll be all warmed up. Yeah. Before I let you go, I was just wondering, you've always been one to not give long speeches, but you always tend to have a comment or two to say at promotions and stuff when stuff comes around. Is there anything, not for the audience, because we have 2 people listening, so I don't care. But for a guy like me in where I am as a blue belt, any advice, words of wisdom, any thoughts?
I think you guys actually said it, but the biggest thing I took out of coming up and doing jiu-jitsu, and the way I feel like I evolved the most was just training the train and not worrying about my ego and worrying about winning every round and winning every exchange and stuff, and just take it in stride and just try to just do the techniques and learn as much as you can, and try to just put your ego aside and just try to train the train. If you tap, I guarantee I tap more as a purple belt than any of you guys have in your careers. So just don't worry about the winning the round, and just keep going. And
oh man, so I have to get rid of that ledger I have at home with the win-loss record. I've never done this before, but I think it actually is appropriate in your case. Any shout outs? I know you are a rep for Origin. So do you have any shout outs you'd like to make before we let go?
I mean, I don't really try to shout out, but I mean, the Origin guys are great. This is a great company. They make the best skis in my opinion, and the best stuff for the sport. And my friends, the Four Horsemen, from the Origin group and stuff like that. But no, if anybody does need anything Origin, I can get it for you. If you want to come to me, I can give you any tips or any advice. So. And
have you tried that new wraparound, the Rift, where they did the different cuts and stuff?
Yeah, I have the prototype. I haven't really actually.
Was there a significant difference in how it felt?
It did feel better. It did feel different. I haven't tried it out rolling or anything. I've been hurt since I got it, but.
But you stared at yourself in the mirror like, ooh.
people I trust say they like it. So
is it like a tighter? Is it like
It's just I don't different. Know, like it's hard to explain.
It's not like a narrow fit like button down or something. Like how they have standard or slim fit. That's what I'm thinking.
I don't think so, and it really depends. It just it just fits better in the different like positions. It's not like a baggy just sheet that you're putting on.
Yeah.
It is a little bit fitted, but overall I don't think it's. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, Tommy, it's been an absolute pleasure. Don't be a stranger. I hope we see you many times in the future.
Thanks for having me on. It was awesome.